Before My Heart Gives Out by Kira 18 on AO3. Chapter 21. Do you think I asked for this? Izuku knows when he's getting closer to his destination almost instinctively. The sheer amount of life packed into the place makes it shine almost like a beacon on his radar. The structure in itself buzzes with life, whether it was from the numerous electrical currents surging through the walls or the countless people moving within its boundaries. The flickering heat signatures form a web, slithering and winding through the structure like a protective shield, blocking the rest of the world from its confines. Albeit beautiful, it is also one of the many reasons why Izuku tends to avoid public places like this one. His brain can only take so much information before his senses are driven to their brink. The resulting sensory overload makes it hard for him to discern any of the information he receives, rendering him, once again, absolutely blind. However, over the years, Izuku has built enough control over his powers to avoid this particular outcome, so the moment he walks into the mall's building, he turns his radar down, closing his view to a very small space around his body, and successfully blocking out the excess information. This, on the other hand, also means that he'll be oblivious to any suspicious activity going around him. He supposes the whole point of this outing was to take a break from his nighttime job anyways. His cane swipes at the floor in front of him. The low scraping sound is almost a relief, his senses zoning in on it, blocking out the roar of the bustling crowd around him. He feels for Shinsou's familiar presence next to him, a presence he'd come to miss more than he'd cared to admit in the last few weeks. Their meeting had been bittersweet. Shinsou's hesitation throughout their whole interaction was blatantly obvious. The boy didn't know how to interact with him anymore, probably expecting to be shut out at any moment. Izuku has solely himself to blame for that. However, the teen's happiness at seeing him stung even more. The sheer amount of affection that swelled in Izuku's heart felt like countless stabs piercing his heart. He reminds himself that this is what he wanted. Space and distance. A chance for Shinsou to forget him before it was too late. He lowered his head, eyes trained on the ground, trying to will his mind into believing his own desperate lies. Midoriya! The call startles him despite his efforts to keep his senses open around him, his thoughts having drifted. Izuku had subconsciously blocked out the rest of the world. Glad you made it, man! He recognizes the voice's owner as Kirishima. The alleged redhead bounces excitedly his way, posture practically radiating energy. In step with the redhead is a heat signature he recognizes almost instantly. He feels Bakugo's eyes on him the moment he steps closer. Izuku, for his part, tries to meet the teen's gaze as best as he can. His unseeing eyes trail to the general vicinity of Bakugo's head, hoping he's catching the boy's gaze head on. Hey, Kirishima, are the rest of the class already here? The question probably takes the teen off guard, if the way he steps further is any indication. He regains his composure soon enough, though, his energy never wavering as he answers, probably not used to having to point. Hey, Kirishima, are the rest of the class already here? The question probably takes the teen off guard, if the way his steps falter is any indication. He regains his composure soon enough, though, his energy never wavering as he answers, probably not used to having to point out obvious things. Yeah, man, most of us, anyways. The only ones left were you guys. Keep walking straight and you'll reach the rest of the group. Kirishima then strikes up a conversation with Shinsou, and like that, they fall into step with them, walking towards the garnered teens ahead of them. He hears Bakugo's unsteady breathing next to him, and moves to match his stride. Hey, Kachan. The nickname slips from his mouth too easily. Old habits tended to die hard. Didn't take you for the class get-together type of guy. He expects the boy to retaliate, curse him, or at least shout something at him. He doesn't expect the teen to ignore him, though, legs picking up their speed, if only slightly, hitting the ground with more force as the boy's hands clench in his pocket. The information registers dually in Izuku's mind. Bakugo's reaction is the only indication he gets that the boy even heard him. Do you need something for your training camp? Izuku ventures, hesitantly. The silence stretches, and he thinks that he's probably being ignored again. If not for the low, almost imperceivable, if not for Izuku's powers, no. The teen grits out after what feels like an eternity. Kachan, is something... Midoriya, you came! Uraraka's explanation cuts off his sentence, and he finds himself being swept in the class's usual chaos. He can't help but sneak out the familiar, consistent heat signature through it all, though. He finds a Pharisee gaze trained on him all the while. He finds his opportunity to question the teen. A little while later. We're decided then, Ida declares with more pride than absolutely necessary for this particular situation. We'll split off into pairs depending on the items we each need to find. I, myself, will go with Shinsou. Both of us acquire sleeping bags. Midoriya, I was thinking you would come with us, since you didn't actually come here to buy anything. I was thinking I'd stay with Kachan, since he doesn't need to buy anything, too. He feels the boy tense up the moment he says this. It only serves to encourage his attempts at cornering the teen. What he finds suspicious, however, is the fact that, besides the boy's obvious discomfort, he doesn't say anything to protest. As they all start to split up, he can't help but call out just as the taller boy turns to go his way. Hey, Shinsou! Guilt galls at his inside as the teen perks up, hope radiating off his posture as he turns around. Catch up with us later, yeah? We'll get ice cream or something, maybe. The boy nods, almost instinctively, forgetting that Izuku isn't supposed to see it. Yes. See you then. He says, when Ida shoots him an incredulous look that almost makes Izuku laugh, if not for the tight feeling in his chest. He opts for a shaky smile instead. It's only a minute later, when he feels like he's finally alone with the blonde, that he lets it drop, face twisting into a gloomy, neutral expression. Empty, almost, as if the emotions he'd been suppressing twist and nullify each other until all that's left is a void. You know, don't you? His voice feels strange to his own ears as he utters the words. Back turned to the explosion user, he twists his walking stick until it folds up into its smaller form. He's not planning on going anywhere until they talk. The silence is once again his only response. The air feels like it's charged with a heavy sort of pressure, thick and suffocating, as it feels for the other boy's reaction, zoning in on the teen's body and blocking out the rest. He feels the tremble of Bakugo's hands, clenched tightly, knuckles without a doubt white with the pressure. He hears the boy's heart pick up almost drastically at his words, at the implications behind them. I mean, he continues, knowing the blonde wasn't going to speak anytime soon. I didn't know until I saw you today, but I knew someone was bound to hear us out on that balcony. He murmurs, slowly turning to face the hero in training. I'm sorry you had to hear that. Bakugo's fists slowly unclench, the boy probably only noticing them now. You fucking idiot. He grunts out, head bowed, shoulders trembling with tension. You're sorry that I had to hear it? His voice rises with emotion, head whipping up to look at him. Not that you're... His breath hitches, and he stops himself before he says it. His hands rise to swipe at his hair, ruffling them in frustration. A manifestation of his helplessness he's feeling, but it's nonetheless unable to express correctly. Fuck! How did... Fucking shit, Izuku. Did you think that I wouldn't want to know? Did you think that you could what? Hide it? Were you going to know when we got the fucking invitation to your funeral? People were starting to whisper around them, shooting occasional suspicious looks their way. Bakugo, however, didn't seem to care. Is that it? Is that what you wanted? Dampness spread across his cheeks. Izuku vaguely registers that he's crying. What? Were you just going to keep it to yourself? Only telling the half-and-half bastard? Is that what you fucking wanted? To die alone? The resonating noise seemed to echo through the room, the force sending Bakugo staggering backwards, his hands instantly coming to touch his stinging cheeks, eyes wide, as if breaking out in some sort of trance. Eyes finally focusing on Izuku's heaving sob form in front of him, fists clenched tightly from the punch. Izuku, how dare you? The low whisper cuts off whatever apology was going to spill out of the blonde's throat. Do you think I wanted this? His voice trembles, but he keeps his tone low, dull milky green eyes looking into fiercely red, meeting his gaze head on. Do you think I wanted my mom to sacrifice herself for me, only to go and die anyways? Do you think I wanted any of this? He's gestured at his face, hands coming up to pull at his bangs, letting the full extent of the scar on his face show for the first time. Ignoring Bakugo's intake of breath, he continues, wanting to let out the building pressure plaguing his chest. Do you think I want to die? That I chose this? Calming down his racing heart, he tries to catch his breath, hands scrubbing the tears out of his eyes before they fall back on his side. You know, if I actually had a choice, I would have told Eraser to save my mom instead. At least then, one of us would have grown old. With that, he thinks it's high time he went for a walk, wanting to clear his mind a little. He shouldn't have brought this up. Bakugo wasn't trying to offend him. The boy was probably hurt and confused. Turning to walk away, he feels a hand grab his wrist. The next thing he knows, he's being pulled into a crushing hug. Two warm arms encase him, and he can't help but lean into the hold, not realizing how much he needed it until now. I'm sorry I yelled. The whisper into the taller boy's shoulder, fully aware of how weird they must look from a stranger's point of view. Shut up, you idiot. After a moment, I'm sorry too. His hands around him squeeze tighter, before finally letting him go. We look pathetic. Bakugo huffs with a grin. Wouldn't want to ruin your reputation now, would we? His jab gets him a punch to the shoulder. No real strength behind it. He plays the blind card anyways, acting as if the hit hurt him incredibly. You can't hit a blind person. That's just low. Fucking shut up, dumbass. They start walking away, only to be stopped by a gruff, painfully familiar voice. Where do you think you're going, Bakugo? Before Izuku could even think of reacting, the villain is already on him, arm coming to rest on his neck, 5 fingers drumming dangerously close to his pulse. Bakugo snarls, dangerously, feet moving as if to charge at the man. Me and you are going to have a little chat. Shigaraki states, evenly, 4 fingers coming to a halt on his neck. Or else, your friend here gets it. The pressure on his neck builds up, and he can't breathe. Kane, unconsciously falling from his grip and onto the ground, with a resonating clang, too loud and unnatural on his ears. His senses were going haywire. Let him go, Shigaraki. He has nothing to do with this. Bakugo snarls, tiny explosions popping menacingly from his palms. I wouldn't do that if I were you. One wrong move and my fingers might just slip, and then... We both know that particular outcome, don't we? After what feels like forever, but can't be more than a few seconds, Bakugo nods, explosion stopping just as Shigaraki releases some of the pressure on his neck. Coughs rack his body as he tries to regain his bearings. The hand on his neck moves in warning, and he stifles the urge to lean forward, to fight, to move. Too many witnesses, too many eyes around them. Good now, Izuku was it? At the shock and glare Bakugo shoots him, the villain exclaims, I couldn't help but hear your little lover's quarrel back there. You were being quite loud, you know, although I didn't really hear much anyways. He mutters, as if in disappointment. We'll be moving to that fountain over there. Wait. Bakugo calls out, stopping them before they can move. He needs his cane. Fine. But I'll keep it with me for now. The villain says, as he snatches the picked item from the explosion wielder. Wouldn't want the blind kid to hit anyone with it now, would we? Izuku can practically hear the sarcasm and arrogance in his tone. The world feels muddled throughout the whole interaction. Shigaraki seems to be having a conversation entirely all to himself. It comes to a point where Izuku wonders why the man even bothered to come to Bakugo about it. It wasn't like the blonde was going into a whole philosophical trite-about hero society with the murderous man-child in front of him. Yet, the more Shigaraki talks, the more Izuku feels like there's something he's missing. Do you think you're going to amount to anything with that little league of yours? Izuku says without really thinking about it, satisfied with the shocked silence that follows his statement. A constant stream of distraction, distraction, distraction repeats itself like a mantra in his mind. The words garner the reaction he wants. If the way Shigaraki's hands loosen is any indication, he can feel Bakugo trying and failing to find a way to warn him. I mean, you don't even have a clear message to send the public. All you're after is killing All Might and destroying heroes. Have you learned nothing from Zine? Izuku. Bakugo warns, voice strained. Shut it. The villain warns. I want to hear this. All he needs is 1 second. One moment where Shigaraki's hands slip a little, and he'll be able to act. You really are a bunch of amateurs. He continues, nonchalantly, enjoying the way Shigaraki's hand twitches, as if wanting to move. Scratch at his neck, probably. He's close. He knows it. At least Stain knows that All Might isn't just some hero you can kill. He respects the symbol he represents. There. Shigaraki's eyes widen in shock and dawning realization of what Izuku will never know, considering the bullshit he just spouted off to gain time. His hands loosen for a second, just a split second where his fingers are at a good distance away from his pulse. Luckily for Izuku, a split second is all he needed. Elbow coming up, he hits Shigaraki's throat, hands immediately reaching for his cane, twisting it out of the wheezing villain's grip, and knocking away the fingers reaching for him. He's not fast enough, though. Shigaraki managed to graze his arm just as he pulls away. Izuku! He hears Bakugo shout, but ignores it, too busy stifling a cry of pain, only letting out a hiss as he jumps out of the way. Positioning himself between the villain and Bakugo, Izuku stands on high alert, fully aware of the metaphorical landmine he just triggered. His arm bleeds just below the shoulder. Blood trails all the way to his fingers. Each drop that hits the ground creates a waterfall sound too strong and too loud for his ears. You little brat! Shigaraki howls, bloodlust amplifying as his gaze burns a hole through Izuku's senses. The moment he seems like he's about to fling himself at them, two figures turn up. What's going on here? Shigaraki asks, voice low, threatening. Shigaraki turns as if to answer, but cuts himself off the moment he sees who he's talking to. Huffing out an annoyed breath, he turns back to Izuku and Bakugo, tone dark and voice low as he speaks, a dark mist forming around his form. I'll show you what kind of league we are. The villain hisses, menacingly. We'll meet again, Izuku. The way he says his name makes the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Involuntary shivers rack his body as Shigaraki finally disappears into a pool of darkness. Fuck. And yes, Bakugo might be right on that one. What the hell were you thinking? Bakugo screams the moment Ida goes off to call the police, immediately tearing a piece of his shirt and tying it around the hand-shaped wound on Izuku's arm. The wound in itself is shallow, but the blood still hasn't stopped, which is somewhat expected but still worrying nonetheless. The teen's body language is closed off. Shoulders tense, movements stiff, as he works on taking care of Izuku. Izuku wants to shoot the teen some sarcastic response about turning to dust, but he knows it won't help the blonde. He could practically see the guilt radiating off his posture, and adding to it won't help anyone. I wasn't, he says finally, hands fiddling with the walking stick still in his hold. I just wanted us to get away from him. Are you okay, Izu? Shinsou asks, cutting off whatever response Bakugo had. I'm fine. Honest. At Shinsou's pointed look, he conceals to a more honest. It's just a sore throat and a... How do you describe a hand-shaped disintegrated skin wound without making it sound worrying? Small cut? It sounds like a question to his own ears, and he can feel Bakugo shake his head at Shinsou, scoffing and muttering something about dumbass blind idiots. The police is on their way, Ida says as he joins them once again, body moving even stiffer than usual. I've also taken the liberty of contacting Aizawa-sensei. He will need to know the League made contact with you. His luck just kept getting better, didn't it? Will Aizawa question him again if he saw him? Would the police make him go back to the orphanage? Midoriya. He seemed zoned out before all three boys were looking at him now. Huh? I'm sorry, what did you say, Ida? I asked if you wanted me to contact anyone from your family. They won't let us come with you to the police station, but surely they'll let one of your parents. He feels both Bakugo and Shinsou stiffen at the question. Both of the teens were fully aware that he didn't have any family left. He was alone, after all. Pulling the best smile he could muster, he answered the boy. No, it's okay. I don't mind going alone. You won't be. Bakugo states simply, effectively taking the spotlight off of Izuku. They'll need my witness testimony too. It's settled then. Come on, they instructed us to meet at the entrance, and the rest of the class are heading there right now. Aizawa knew the moment his phone flashed, bathing the darkness of his office with blue fluorescent light, displaying the name Ida Tenya in bold letters, that something serious had happened. The hurried announcement that the mall outgoing had been crashed by Shigaraki of all people was unexpected. However, it was not the biggest piece of information that he got from the class president. Ida's call explained that Bakugo and a friend of the class were together when Shigaraki used that friend as leverage to get Bakugo to listen to him. Upon further inquiry, Ida finally revealed the boy's name, Izuku Midoriya. If that wasn't enough of a shock, Ida had to go and explain that Midoriya was the one who fought off Shigaraki into leaving, or at least until they were both out of danger. So that's how Aizawa found himself waiting in Shikuichi's office, hands drumming the table, his nerves subconsciously manifesting. You know what this means, right? Shikuichi says, without turning to face the underground hero. Hands folded against his chest as he waited for the two teens to arrive. And yes, Aizawa did know. It complicated things, but at the same time, it gave him the opportunity he'd been desperately looking for months now. A second chance, an opportunity to make things right. At his silence, Shikuichi turns around to meet his eyes. Gaze intense, as they traded an unspoken agreement. We'll do it this time. We'll save him. Alright, okay, look at that. So we're gonna start with, sensory overload. I cannot even imagine having to be in a mall when, like, you could hear everything. Like, I already really fucking hate going to the mall because it's, like, super, super big. Like, I have to go with someone. I can't go alone. I know that there's some people who like to go to shopping alone and stuff like that. Like, I don't. I tried it once. I hated it. I hated every second of it. It was so awkward. It was so weird. I felt so out of place. I was in pain. And even when I go with friends, sometimes it's like awkward, sometimes it's like I want home. I want home. Home, please. Home. I just don't like really public areas where it's like a bunch of people talking, a bunch of movements. I have to have one of my headphones on, otherwise I will start to sob and cry and want to off myself. Is that something normal? No, that's something I need to talk to my therapist about. But anyways, I can even imagine the sensory overload with like that much, sensory intake, like not sensory, but information intake. Okay, so the argument that Bakugo and Izuku had, I want to talk about it. Because they did, it was an argument. It was a full on like kind of fight. They both said something that they probably regretted, and they came out of it a bit better, right? They had that hug at the end, and I feel like this fight served its same purpose as the fight of Ground Beta. It's the same purpose of like, okay, now we're better. Now after this fight, we can actually see eye to eye. which I can't even imagine what Bakugo feels. Because it's one thing Shinsou was in this friendship for a month or two, and then he found out Izuku was dying, and continued to stay. Bakugo has known Izuku since he was little, right? And even though Izuku disappeared at the age of 10 and then came back 4 years later, to find out that he's dying in a couple months, that shit must be fucking devastating. I can't even imagine how Bakugo's going through this, especially knowing that he wanted to make things better because of the absolute fucking shit he was. And to find out that he doesn't get that chance. He has 7 months to 9 months